How should you handle potential beast mode return? Is the Falcons' backfield timeshare about to get even more close? And have the Bucs already settled on their number one runner? Plus, DraftSharks.com writer and award-winning podcast host Matt Schauf is going to join me tonight to talk about some early season draft sleepers, the Broncos offense, and his thoughts on where Travis Kelce should be going in FFPC drafts. We have a great show for you. I'm Eric Balkman. Matt Schauf is here. Stick around. Your Eric Balkman Show edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour starts now. Salutations, all you Balkaholics. I'm Eric Balkman, of course, your slightly above average host. Welcome in to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com here on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. My co-host is normally the patron saint of fantasy football, the Dizzle, Dave Gerzak, but he is actually off this week, but sitting in the old virtual chair, the co-hosting virtual chair tonight is one of our favorite co-hosts in HSFF Hour history. Of course, you read all the great stuff he writes at DraftSharks.com. You follow him on Twitter at SchaufDS. You can follow DraftSharks on Twitter at DraftSharks. And, of course, host of the award-winning DraftSharks Fantasy Football Podcast. Joining me tonight, my co-host and my co-owner for the 2016 Scott Fish Bowl, Matt Schauf. Welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me back on, man. I'm in one of two cat bedrooms in my house right now, just hoping I'm not the worst smelling thing in here.
Wait a minute. Your cats have bedrooms?
Yeah, and I mean, not technically, but, once their stuff is in there, it's basically taking up the room downstairs. It's kind of occupied. The less you go in there, the less you have to worry about picking up after them.
Let this be a lesson to the kids out there. Once you become an FST award-winning podcast host, you get to live high on the hog, and then your house, you get to have rooms added to your house. It's just bedrooms for your cats. So that is that's fantastic.
Right.
Hey, listen, before we go any further,
pet editions this year.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, you can afford to. You stepped up in the midnight hour here. We had technical difficulties with Patrick Daly, who was supposed to be on the show tonight. That prevented him from being on the show. But thank you, Matt, for joining on such short notice. We have a great show tonight. We're going to talk about the Washington ground game. We're going to talk about who your handcuffs should be for Le'Veon Bell. We have a ton more to chat about, of course, with Matt Schauf tonight here on the HSFF Hour. And by the way, thanks to everybody in the chat room. Shout out to you guys right now. Allegedly, I heard there's a basketball tournament going on, and I appreciate you guys keeping the TV on mute and listening to us. We appreciate that. Feel free to post any questions you guys might have in the chat room if you want to connect with us on Twitter. I am at Eric Balkman. The show is at HSFF Hour. Matt is at SchaufDS. You can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/HSFF Hour. You can give us a call at 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVER. And, of course, highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com is the FedEx inbox. Our producer and mutual friend, Rob, our audio engineer, Bryce, working extra hard tonight to get those questions to us later on in the show. And Matt and I will be happy to answer them. Up at the front of the show tonight, we had a big week at the FFPC, and I just want to, anybody who didn't notice the emails and checked out the blog or the site or the social media or whatever that maybe have missed it, but we are going to be at Planet Hollywood, back on the Strip here in 2017 for the FFPC live event, September 7th through the 9th. 2017 Planet Hollywood Resort right on the Strip in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. $1.7 million prize pool in the main event, a $250,000 grand prize. You can sign up for that at myffpc.com/main event right now. 13 live times, 6 online times. There is a ton of opportunities for you guys to jump into the main event this year. I wish you the best when you decide to do so. The 2017 Football Guys Players Championship, $250,000 grand prize, $2 million prize pool. That kicks off once again June 4th, 2017, June 4th. I believe that is a Sunday, so you can start drafting those teams for that. Coming up on June 4th. You can register for those right now at myffpc.com/footballguys. And, of course, we do have satellites open, draft experts, Superflex leagues, classics, DEs, slow, live, whatever your pleasure is, $35, $77, $250 levels. And, of course, we are taking signups for Dynasty Startups. We have a Dynasty Startup kicking off on April 1st. So before the NFL draft, you can pick the rookies for an added challenge there, not knowing where they're going to be. Otherwise, the rest of the startups will be kicking off May 13th. So check that out at myffpc.com/dynasty. All right, let's get into it. Matt Schauf joining the show tonight. Very excited to have you on, man. And, first things first. Draft Sharks already in 2017 mode. You guys have you got rankings out there. I know Jared Smola worked hard on those. Certainly bounced some ideas off you, Matt. And then, Matt, you did a lot of the Dynasty rookie profiles as well on the site. But there's a lot going on right now at DraftSharks.com.
Yeah, like you said, Jared's rankings are up. I usually have my rankings together right now. Not able to do early draft-only drafting here in New York because of legal stuff, but very focused on the Dynasty stuff right now. Rookies have really been my focus for the past few weeks.
Yeah, you for anybody who follows you on Twitter, you had the great, tweeting out your Deshaun Kaiser profile, and you had the great Red Hot Chili Peppers lyrical reference. Give it away. Keep it like the Kaiser from Give It Away. That was awesome. Matt is a good follow on Twitter. There's some stuff about what it's going to take for you to be on Justin Hunter this year. It's going to take some heroin trafficking in Pittsburgh. That was awesome as well. So plenty of stuff there. Plenty of stuff on DraftSharks.com and Matt Schauf's Twitter as well. So check that out right now because there is a lot of great stuff to get the juices going here in March. Let's talk about what you would be doing in drafts right now, Matt. If you were in a draft right now and you had, let's just say an FFPC format, and you had a top 3 pick, is it just as simple as I'll just take Bell or Elliott or David Johnson? Is it just as simple as taking those guys, or is there a receiver that you would look at over any of those running backs?
I would probably go David Johnson first, but I think I'd still lean Antonio Brown second. Le'Veon Bell has obviously been awesome whenever on the field, but he's been in the league for 4 years now. He started the first one with a Liz Frank sprain. He finished the second one with a hyperextended knee. He finished his third one early with 2 torn knee ligaments. And then he finished last year, even though it was in the playoffs, with the groin injury. So, at the top of round 1, just a little bit too much injury question for me with him. I think he belongs in that range, but I think I would probably lean Antonio Brown ahead of him still. And Ezekiel Elliott, I guess I would just like to see a little bit more receiving use. I certainly think it's quite possible he stays up in that range forever. But right now, if I'm picking in March, I got to go the safer route and take Antonio Brown.
One of the guys that Dave always likes to rip on the show is Julio Jones because of the tantalizing, physical attributes, the tantalizing numbers that he puts up every single year. But Dave doesn't like the fact that Julio Jones seems to not really put it together for his owners. When you look at his whole career in the playoffs, he had that one really good week a couple of years ago. I think that was against the Packers. He just went boffo in the week 14 to 16 sprint. That the FFPC has. But Dave always hates it because it always seems like Julio is hobbled for those last 3 weeks of the season. And even if he plays, he's more of a decoy or he's not involved or he's been easy to shut down. Where do you fall on Julio Jones as a first-round pick this year? Is this a guy that you would look at getting on your team, or is he a guy like Dave that you're going to probably stay away from?
No, I mean, I think he belongs in round one again, but I think that he's just another argument for Antonio Brown staying in the top three, where you have Julio Jones up there, you have Odell Beckham up there. I think Dez Bryant's in the round one area. I think Mike Evans and A.J. Green are in there. But Antonio Brown's the one guy that belongs up there. So for Julio, I mean, he had a good overall season last year, but extremely up and down week to week if you look at him. You can make up for that if you're playing a draft experts format. But, it does make him riskier. He does have durability issues. And I think we're all expecting some kind of negative regression from the Falcons offense in the coming year with Matt Ryan coming off his career best season and Kyle Shanahan gone.
A guy who came off his career best season, and it wasn't a very high bar to jump over, was Trevor Siemian, mostly because he got a job last year, a starting job in the NFL, quarterbacking the Denver Broncos. Now, a lot of people, Matt, were concerned about the fantasy value of Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, with Trevor Siemian throwing the football to them rather than Peyton Manning. We saw them hold their value pretty well. I think they both had, top 15, top 20 seasons last year among receivers. So they weren't complete busts. They weren't fantastic either, but nobody was really drafting them last year to be fantastic. Now, Denver is still, in the Tony Romo sweepstakes. However that ends up, we don't know, and we probably won't know for several weeks yet. But if he is not going to be the quarterback this year, you would think it's either going to be Siemian again or maybe the first-round draft pick last year, Paxton Lynch. Now, what does that do, depending – we know what Siemian will do for these guys because we saw what happened last year. What does it do for Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders' 2017 seasons if it's Paxton Lynch that's named the opening week starter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can consider Paxton Lynch an upgrade over Trevor Siemian. We'll see how they both look when we get to summer. But that said, I think that Thomas and Sanders are probably going to both be fine value-wise when you get into drafts. Demaryius Thomas last year finished wide receiver 16 in PPR scoring on his worst statistical season among 5 years as a starter, scored 5 touchdowns. The year before that, he was wide receiver 9 in PPR, scoring just 6 touchdowns. He's going 18th, I believe, among wideouts so far, third round or later. So I'll gladly take Demaryius Thomas in round 3, round 4. Emmanuel Sanders is going outside the top 24. The past 3 years, his 3 seasons with the Broncos, he finished 19th, 18th, and 5th among PPR wideouts. So, again, I think that's a pretty good bet on him there. I don't think the floor goes much lower than that unless he gets hurt. And that's with the Broncos in the bottom half of the league in pass frequency over the past 2 years. So if they increase their pass volume, that only adds target upside to those guys. And I don't think there are very big challenges for targets in Denver right now, along with Sanders and Thomas.
We always talk about the Blake Harrington Dynasty League on this show, a league that both Dave and I, of course, two-packer, longtime listener, is also a member of. And in that league, I acquired Emmanuel Sanders. It might have been in the startup. I mean, I feel like I've had him on this team for forever, and it seems like I've always been trying to get rid of him. Any potential trade offers that I'm throwing out there, I'm always using him as not really a filler, but a throw-in type guy to sweeten the pot a little bit. But as I'm listening to you talk about Sanders, it almost seems like he's definitely not quarterback proof. But with Siemian or Lynch, I mean, I might be better off holding on to Sanders because his perceived value doesn't seem like it's ever going to meet what his actual value has been.
Right, that's the thing. We get to this time of year, and you finish the season, you say, okay, well, Emmanuel Sanders is not going to be as good as he was last year. But that's what everybody else is thinking too. So if everybody drops him down, then you look at his draft spot and you're like, oh, all right. Well, I guess I'm all right with Emmanuel Sanders. And yeah, he's 30, but he still has 2 more seasons on his Denver contract, another year beyond that if they play out the whole thing. So it's one of those like, all right, fine. If nobody else is going to take Emmanuel Sanders, then I'll take him right here and be my wide receiver 3.
This next subject is near and dear to your heart, the Philadelphia Eagles, who I know you're a fan of. Of course, we're talking with Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com, host of the DraftSharks Fantasy Football Podcast. Matt, the Eagles made some significant changes in their offense this past offseason. They signed Alshon Jeffrey to the one-year deal. They get Torrey Smith out of free agency as well. What does this do for a guy like, we talk about Jordan Matthews, but specifically Zach Ertz, a guy who, again, last 2 seasons gets off to slow starts, but really ends up crushing it down the stretch, was huge in the FFPC League playoffs and in the championship round for both the main event and the Football Guys Players Championship. Ertz came on big when fantasy owners needed him most. Now there's Torrey Smith. Now there's Alshon Jeffrey. What does this do for Zach Ertz? Because I know it can't help him.
I think that it hurts his target ceiling, it lowers his target ceiling, but if the whole offense gets better, which it probably has to after last year, that should raise the quality of his targets. And at tight end, you don't really have to get the ball that much. Zach Ertz finished 5th among tight ends in targets last year, despite missing 2 games, despite not hitting double-digit targets in a single game until week 11. So as long as he's healthy in 2017, I think he'll be fine. He's going in the bottom half of the top 12 so far, behind guys like Hunter Henry, Tyler Eifert. I don't know yet if Zach Ertz has touchdown upside beyond what he's done so far, because that's the one thing that he really hasn't delivered with any coach, with any quarterback so far. But, you like the receiving floor on him versus other guys at the position. And I think it's okay to take him in that range and see if he'll deliver touchdowns this year.
Dave and I were talking about how the tight ends finished in PPR scoring last year, and he noted that Travis Kelce, who finished as the number 1 tight end, his final, total fantasy point output for 2017 would have put him in 6th place finisher in 2016. So I'm just curious, as we saw how the tight ends finished last year in 2017, it was kind of a down year for the tight ends. Do you think that this was an outlier, or is this something that we can look to maybe be the norm going forward, or at least in 2017?
I think you should probably expect some bounce back in the numbers, but at the same time, like, Greg Olson's getting older. Rob Gronkowski, we don't know if he can stay healthy. Jordan Reed, we don't know if he can stay healthy. Antonio Gates is at least almost done, if not completely done. So Jimmy Graham's getting older. So, maybe those guys that have been setting that bar really high the past few years, perhaps we're looking at just like a little bit of regression overall at tight end for the next couple of years, or, maybe guys like Zach Ertz or Travis Kelce or a couple other guys who are fighting for that top 5. Maybe they're the ones who raise the bar and the ones that you just take a chance on and see if they can put it all together this season.
Getting back to the Eagles, Matt, I know that you're hopeful of the Jeffrey and the Smith additions making, the tide raises all ships, as the old adage goes. So maybe the Eagles offense will be better on a whole. You have to be excited about that for an Eagles fan from a fantasy perspective. Who's the guy you're going after here? Is it Jeffrey, or is his, the fact that everybody seems to be liking this fit with Carson Wentz playing in the NFC East, where there hasn't been a lot of great defensive efforts over the last few years. Is Jeffrey being overvalued? Who gets you excited from a fantasy perspective in this Eagles offense right now?
I would say, honestly, nobody right now. If they don't draft another guy to challenge in the backfield, to challenge to be the starting running back, then I guess Darren Sproles probably has the highest ceiling relative to where he's being drafted. Carson Wentz, down toward the bottom of QB2 territory. I think there's upside on him. But otherwise, I think everybody's just kind of appropriately valued right now. There are guys that are fine at their spots, but nobody that I'm excited about. If they get any of the rookie running backs in the first 2 or 3 rounds, I think that guy, whoever he might be, is going to have a pretty high ceiling, because it's a solid spot for that player.
Matt, we can expand this next question to include Dynasty as well, but I know that you've already looked ahead to the 2017 season for both these rookies that are coming into the league and, different veterans. Maybe they moved around, or maybe guys who have stayed in the same place. Their value may have changed. Is there one guy, or maybe a couple of guys right now, that you're just having difficulty putting your finger on how he's going to do this season? You can project all you want for a lot of these guys, and you'll pretty much know how you feel about a guy, especially by the time draft time rolls around. But is there a guy right now, you look at his situation, you look at the coaching, you look at the offense he's in, and you're just kind of like throwing up your hands saying, I honestly don't know what's in store for this guy this year?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases, it's kind of situations more than specific players, like the Detroit backfield. I don't know, as I get ready to project everybody, I don't know how to break down the touches among everybody. And Amir Abdullah is, the most obvious guy in there. I have no idea what to expect from him. I was optimistic heading into last season, not as optimistic as my boy Jared Smola, but I was optimistic, and then he got hurt in week 2, and now we have no idea because there are a ton of guys in that backfield. So, it's going to be a total crapshoot. You're going to guess how many touches to project to everybody, rank them somewhere, and there's no way that they're going to finish in the same order that you project them. Ravens wide receivers are kind of the same way. I mean, Steve Smith's gone, the one guy that I felt like I could count on for targets. Kamar Aiken's gone. I mean, he's not a high-end guy, but he was one of their top 5 in targets. So, how do the targets get spread out? How many do Brashad Perriman get? How high is too high to project him? Is it time to be excited, or are too many people going to be excited? Those are a couple of the guys that are going to confound me over the next month or so, I think.
Yeah, confound all of us, really, and I think these are going to be the situations that we're looking at, when mini camps get here, OTAs, and then training camp to see what the coaches are saying, to see what these players are doing. It's going to affect ADP. It's going to affect a lot of what we're doing in our drafts as well. I hope the fact that we have to take a quick break will not affect you tuning out. We have much more with Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com coming up on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. This is Eric Balkman. You're listening to the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. You are listening to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. My name is Eric Balkman. Dave Gerzak is off this week, but sitting in for him, we have DraftSharks.com writer and podcaster Matt Schauf talking, really everything tonight. We've hit on some dynasty stuff, hit on some rookie stuff. We're going to hit on a lot more. Let's get into a philosophical question here, Matt. When we talk about, it's not like, you and I, and a lot of people, it wasn't a secret about zero RB. I mean, we knew about this for the last few years, and some people have been using it for even longer than that. Going with this strategy of pounding receivers early, trying to get running backs late. This was nothing new. But I feel like last year we saw really a massive influx of people using the zero RB strategy, more than I'd ever seen before. And I think it didn't work out for a lot of people last year. And I don't know if that's because so many people were using the strategy. It sort of thinned out the receiver pool, and it made the running backs that much more valuable. If you hit on one early or if you hit on one late, it could prove to be a real league winner. But we look at 2017, and now we're talking about Bell Elliott and David Johnson all going in the top half of the first round. When you look at how you think drafts are going to shake out this coming season, do you think this is the revenge of the running back year after zero RB didn't work out for a lot of people last year? Do you see running backs getting pushed up more this season than last? Otherwise, I know a lot of the zero RB guys are excited for this season because they think so many people are going to go away from it. It is going to make it a massive league-winning strategy again. Where do you fall in on this line of thinking?
I mean, the last point that you mentioned is, I think, the key one. Any time that a lot of people are switching to one particular direction, I think the other direction is what you at least want to think about going in. So, if we end up seeing a whole bunch of running backs pushed up early, then go against that and get value at wide receiver and then grab this pool of running backs after that. That said, I think it's so far from the numbers that I've seen, it's just in round one. There are the 3 guys that you mentioned at the top of the round. There are 6 guys going in round one in general. It's tough to get strong ADP numbers this early, but there are like 6 guys in round one. There are about 10 in the first 2 rounds, and then about 14 running backs in the first 3 rounds. So that's really not a huge number at the position. So if it continues like that, then I think it's going to overblow the story that people are, going back to running backs. And in that case, just kind of continue the way that you have been. Going to be valuing running backs much more strongly than I did last year. I think I was probably valuing them a little bit more strongly last year than many people were because, lots more people, I think, were switching to that zero RB theory.
It's almost like you have to be fluid in how you approach drafts. I mean, you can love receivers and just, try to figure out running backs late, or you can be, the staunch old school application of getting 2 stud running backs early and then filling in receivers after that. But I feel like in order to be successful year to year, you have to be able to have a fungible approach to it, being able to tweak how much you like each position or how much you're going to go after a position year to year, no matter, how philosophically, how you fall in on running back versus receiver.
Right. Yeah, that's my thing, too, is you might get into a draft where there are 7 people that you're drafting with who are going, 0 RB or ranking RBs lower, whatever you want to say. And then you might hit another one where there are 5 people who are going running backs early because they've been seeing drafters go the other way. So I think anytime you have to be able to adapt to the people you're drafting with, get value where it is. I'm not one to pigeonhole myself into one strategy. I like to take the value as it's presented to me, and I think that it tends to work out in the end, whichever way I end up going heavy.
Know your league, know your competition, and get your guys. The 3 pillars for fantasy success, surely. We talked about Travis Kelce a little bit earlier, Matt. I want to bring the conversation back to him because he was the number 1 tight end in fantasy last year, and he is going off the board right now in FFPC satellite drafts with an ADP of 212, the second tight end off the board, of course, behind Rob Gronkowski. Is that about, in a tight end premium format, is that about where you're looking at Kelce? If you have the number 1 overall pick or number 2 overall pick, that you would come back and take Kelce right away at the end of the second round and then, look for a back or a receiver in the third? Is that accurate as far as where you think Kelce's value should be right now?
I think that's a fair spot, and I think that if you're in a format where you're going to be setting your lineup every week, he certainly makes sense there. If it's a draft experts format, I would pass on him at that point, wait for another round or 2, get somebody like Jimmy Graham who has a lot more touchdown upside, and piece together 2 or 3 or 4, depending on your strategy, at that position, and I think that you'll get better value that way. I think Travis Kelce is going to be good for a while. I mean, as long as he's healthy, I think he should be top 5. I just don't think he has as high a touchdown ceiling as the other guys at the top of that position. I think that hurts him, in terms of week-to-week value.
Are you more of the thinking that in a 28-round FFPC DE format, you're better off not taking a stud tight end in the first few rounds and sort of, building up 2 or 3, maybe top 15 guys, top 20 guys in that format where you don't have to worry about picking one each week? Is that sort of where because you were in Pros versus Joes. You kind of know what you were thinking going in. Is that going to be your strategy again this year?
Yeah, it depends on how early they really start getting hit. I try to put the guys in tiers and, not making people cry, but putting similar tight ends together, see how quickly my top guys are going. And the later you get, the better you can know ADP. And, Jimmy Graham, I think, is a good example of somebody who has upside probably in top 2 or 3 in the position at this year. If he's sitting 6th or 7th in ADP, then I can say, all right, there are only 3 guys gone. I know I can wait another turn. He's probably still going to be there. So I guess planning like that, not targeting one specific guy, but getting 2, 3, 4 and watching that range and seeing where it's going. I'm not the one probably getting the top guy unless Rob Gronkowski slips into somewhere in round 2. Beyond that, just watching the tiers.
I think that most high-stakes players, at least the ones I've talked to, would agree with you that one of the most difficult things, especially for people who have not played the FFPC format with the 1.5 points per catch for tight ends with the dual flex, one of the things that they struggle with is sort of gauging those tight ends, seeing when they're going and then reacting properly to them, not just completely ignoring the position and then, getting stuck with Josh Hill is your number one tight end or something like that, and then not going crazy on it either and overreacting, and then
right.
utilizing all these early round picks on tight ends just to make sure you get 2 or 3. I think that once you sort of, I don't know if anybody's ever really mastered it, but once you have the experience of knowing what to do and knowing the proper way to react on those tight ends, you're going to be a step ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure there are listeners who have done a lot more FFPC-style drafts than I have, but I've seen it both ways, even in the drafts I've done, where I'll take one early thinking, I got to get one, and then I see other guys waiting longer than I expected them to, and I think, I could have gotten much better value in 2 or 3 rounds. And, another time I'll say, okay, I'm going to wait this time, and I wait too long, and I end up not getting on the train early enough. So, it's really about setting the levels. If you say I'm not going to take somebody till round 6, I think you're in trouble. But if you say I want one of these 5 or 6 guys, or whatever you set your strategy to make sense but be adaptable at the same time.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the proper approach to tight ends. Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com is our co-host tonight, sitting in for Dave Gerzak. He writes for DraftSharks.com, hosts the DraftSharks.com Fantasy Football Podcast. Matt, I have been so selfish tonight asking you all these questions. I want to dip into the email bag a little early here and ask you a couple of questions from some of our listeners that wanted to get an answer to their questions tonight. First one's from Brent in Dayton, Ohio. He writes, hey, how do you see, this is actually one that you kind of touched on earlier of not really knowing how it's going to go. But he writes, hey, how do you see the backfield touches being split between Abdullah, Riddick, Zenner, and Washington this season? Thank you for the email, Brent. And Matt, I know that you're not really sure how it's going to go. So let's just shift this question. For fantasy purposes, if people are drafting in March right now, which they are at the FFPC, is this a situation that you would just be avoiding and just finding somebody else because you simply don't have enough information at this point and don't want to utilize these early to mid round picks on these question marks? Or is this the time to take a stab at Zach Zenner late or Amir Abdullah if he slips? So how would you be approaching this right now in drafts?
I think right now it would depend on if I'm looking for running back or wide receiver at that point, because a lot of the draft experts style drafts, especially, it can vary a lot. I'll go running back heavy early. So if I get to the point where Abdullah and Riddick are going, I might have 4 guys already. I might have 2 receivers. I'm looking for those guys. In that case, I'll be happy to skip over the backfield. At the same time, Abdullah and Riddick are both going outside of RB2 territory right now. I think they're both fine picks right there because I think both of those guys especially can deliver. Of course, Zach Zenner could factor into that just as well as Abdullah is. So I'm not hands off on it. I'm not chasing after it. It's one of those where if Abdullah's the next guy on my board or Riddick's the next guy on my board, I'll say, all right, I'll take him. He's up. I can't get excited at this point. I'm very interested in this backfield to see the summer updates.
And I feel like if you look at Abdullah and Riddick, as we look at this Detroit backfield right now to try to help Brent out here, I feel like those guys aren't really competing with each other for snaps. Like I feel like they both have, if they're healthy, they both have fairly clearly defined roles in this offense. I just don't like it when the coaching staff is saying positive things about Zach Zenner and Dwayne Washington and all these other guys. Right. It's like, don't say anything positive about them because that's just muddying everything up. Say, well, we got a lot of guys here, and just mention Riddick and Abdullah. Don't mention anybody else's names, and we'll kind of know where the coaching staff is on that. Because if they're taking the time to mention the top 2 and ignoring the other guys, well, you kind of know how they feel their backfield is setting up.
Right, and it's tough for me to say exactly how I would treat them without facing that decision in the draft, but the thing that really bugs me about Abdullah is I don't know exactly where he's getting his fantasy value from, because Theo Riddick's the top pass catcher there. Amir Abdullah is not a goal line guy, so is he going to top 200 carries? I don't know. Can he get 30-plus catches? I don't know. I don't think he's going to push for double-digit touchdowns, so he's just kind of in no man's land there in terms of fantasy value. So I see he's going in the same range as like Gio Bernard, Paul Perkins. At the moment, I like each of those guys better than Amir Abdullah just because it's easier for me to map out Right now, where their fantasy value comes from, of course, knowing that once the NFL draft happens, things might be very different in both of those backfields.
Yeah, definitely. That's always the added flavor of drafting early before the NFL draft. You could stumble on some fantastic values depending upon what these teams do. Eddie in Smyrna, Georgia writes, our fantasy owners are undervaluing Rex Burkhead right now. I seem to be able to get him consistently in the 10th round in the FFPC satellites right now. Thanks, man. That is Eddie in Smyrna, Georgia. Now, I looked at this, and Rex Burkhead, the thing is, like, because he was unsigned for so long, his ADP is actually not entirely all that accurate, in my opinion. I mean, he's going, let's see, I just had it up here. I apologize. Rex Burkhead has an ADP of 16th round. Well, he's clearly not going in the 16th round anymore. In fact, he just recently went in the early 8th round of one of the FFPC satellites, and this guy says he's getting him in the 10th. That's probably more accurate than 16th. But Matt, as we look at Burkhead, there's no LeGarrette Blount back there yet. I mean, there's James White, there's Dion Lewis there, and there's Rex Burkhead, who seems, for all intents and purposes, looks like he's carved out a significant role in that New England offensive juggernaut.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't wait that long to sign him, and he certainly goes to a better situation in that he should get the ball, judging by how quickly the Patriots signed him. So it's funny that was the next name that came up. I was just looking at him in the ADP list versus the Lions guys. I would take Rex Burkhead over Amir Abdullah just because, again, it's easier for me to see the value going his way now. That's another backfield where they could add somebody in the draft. They might bring back LeGarrette Blount. I don't know about that yet. But if I'm drafting at this point, I would have to bet on Rex Burkhead leading that backfield in touches.
Yeah, people don't realize this too, but LeGarrette Blount actually had 67 touchdowns in weeks 1 to 8 last year alone. It was crazy the season that LeGarrette Blount had. So Rex Burkhead could be the beneficiary of some more touchdowns in that offense this year. We'll have to see. I'm starting to really like him quite a bit. Matt, give us a guy right now. Obviously a lot can change. We're still however many months out, from the start of the NFL season, like 5.5 months or whatever it is. But give us a guy that you think is a sleeper right now, flying under a lot of people's radars. And then give us a guy that you think is somebody to avoid in the first few rounds, somebody that has a pretty high potential of busting.
Tight ends for the FFPC format. Gary Barnidge, Jason Witten, Vance McDonald, all going at least near or outside the bottom of tight end 2 territory. It's easy to not like Vance McDonald's situation right now because we don't know exactly who his starting quarterback's going to be, but he's playing under Kyle Shanahan. He's the best tight end on the Niners roster. He might be the best receiver on the Niners roster this season. So I think he's a high upside guy relative to where you can draft him. Jason Witten, every fantasy drafter hates in March and April. Nobody wants to draft him at this point. There's no way he's going to finish lower than 15th. So if he's getting drafted below 15th in any, reception-friendly format, then he's good value. And Gary Barnidge, everybody hates Gary Barnidge right now because he doesn't have a quarterback because he plays for Cleveland. Why not draft him somewhere in tight end 2 territory in case he gets back to being the number 2 or number 3 target, even on a bad offense?
Yeah, all guys that you mentioned there too. These guys aren't going as number 1 tight ends in the FFPC right now. So especially in the DE format, you get all those guys, as a high end tight end too. A top 15 guy for sure. I think that's not a bad way to spend an early to mid round pick to get that second tight end locked up. What about a guy that you won't be touching this year?
Melvin Gordon. We talked about running backs getting pushed up the board. I'm fine with the 3 guys that are at the top of the board, but there is absolutely no way that I'm drafting Melvin Gordon ahead of Dez Bryant late in round 1. Gordon, had an excellent season last year, a way better season than I thought he would have. I was hands-off on him at this point last year because of the knee stuff. He proved that the knee stuff wasn't an issue. At the same time, he still finished the season with an injury. He was an inefficient runner throughout the season. You look at Football Outsiders' numbers, their efficiency metrics. his efficiency running the ball did not even come close to matching up with his fantasy production. He got fortunate on touchdowns, and I think he's in a good situation for touchdowns, and he could be in a good situation for receptions if they don't add anybody else to the backfield. But I think that they should. I think that more targets will go to the wideouts with Keenan Allen back. I think there's durability risk, and I think, if there's any loss scoring Melvin Gordon falls out of that range, he's just too big a risk late in round one for me.
Who's the running back that is going to benefit if Melvin Gordon does regress? I mean, obviously you mentioned the touchdowns. Who's the running back that will end up, because Woodhead's gone, who's the guy that benefits from maybe Melvin Gordon having a down season? Or is it just the passing offense where a lot of that production is going to go to with a healthy Keenan Allen?
I would guess that they draft somebody at some point. But right now it's Brandon Oliver. It's just a matter of you combine Melvin Gordon's durability risk just with where you have to draft him. It's not that I hate Melvin Gordon, but I hate drafting him in round one when I can take a wide receiver there and wait until after the turn, take Jay Ajayi or Jordan Howard or even a little bit later than that, Carlos Hyde. So it's not that I like somebody else in the San Diego backfield that much. Just not ready to bet on him in that range.
Matt, when is the next no-holds-bar, knock-down, drag-out, rankings fight with the Draft Sharks team in New York where you guys, huddle up, get everything all set for the 2017 season? When is that taking place, and when will the official Draft Sharks rankings be released for the 2017 season?
Well, we usually have the projections party late in May, maybe early June, where we, finalize everything. It's funny, though, as we go along, Jared and I do our projections separately. And, we always, I'll finish a team and I'll be like, oh, I love this guy way more than you're going to, and I'll post his projection. And then Jared will say, actually, I like him more than you expected, or you're way off. Here's the guy I like. So we spar back and forth with that stuff all the way there. But we have a projections party late May, early June, and then, right in that early June period is when our official projections hit the site.
And I'm just curious, what do you guys do for the NFL draft? I mean, do all the Draft Sharks guys get together and watch it, or how does that shake out every year?
Yeah, we actually have an annual at this point for at least the past 3 years or so, like a company retreat kind of thing. We'll go get a house somewhere. It's been in Skaneateles, New York the past couple of years, and we'll watch the draft that night, do our stuff on the site. We do shark bites through the whole thing. I did a live blog the past 2 years, crack jokes throughout the whole thing, and then spend a couple of days just doing that, working on projections, and also just, talking, mapping out the year ahead.
That's all great stuff, Matt. Very exciting, and I know I can't wait for the NFL draft for sure. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Matt Schauf. We're going to talk about the news and notes around the NFL here in this late March portion of the season. NFL draft right around the corner. So are we. HSFF Hour here on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network rolls on after this. March Madness, it is not just for college basketball anymore. It is also for the NFL. You look at the draft season coming up. Free agency is sort of winding down, but we are in the midst of NFL teams shaping their rosters for the championship season. We are shaping the rest of this show to be a dynamite one for you. I'm Eric Balkman here on the HSFF Hour. Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com filling in for the Dizzle this week. Matt, we talked a lot about, sort of drafting philosophies. We talked a lot about players we like, players we don't like early in the show. Let's get into some of the, they're not massive notes around the NFL. I mean, there's a few things that I think caught my eye when we look at the notes. I do want to thank Draft Sharks, Football Guys, Roto World, and Rob for tonight's rundown. Let's get to it right now and just kind of break these down, what they mean for fantasy, what they mean if you're drafting right now. First off, Marshawn Lynch, in a radio interview on Tuesday, his agent said that the running back does miss football. He said that he has not talked to Marshawn about his apparent comeback plans because he's been away in Canada. He was supposed to see him this week. I don't know if that ever happens. But he says Lynch loves the game of football. He's 30 years old. He doesn't know what his mindset is right now. And obviously we know Marshawn Lynch is a bit whimsical when it comes to making decisions and, living his life. You look at the other weird things that have come out this week. Marshawn Lynch posted, it was on Spotify or on some social media account. He had a playlist with a playlist called Oakland Raiders, or there is a track called Oakland Raiders in his playlist. Friends say that he's been wearing nothing but Oakland Raiders gear around them lately. So clearly he's intrigued. But Matt, let's look at it from the cold, hard fantasy perspective. Do you think he comes back and plays with the Raiders this year or anywhere really? And if you were drafting right now, where would you be taking him, if at all?
I'm waiting for a video from August where they show the Raiders running back room, and he's just sitting in the back, and everybody's surprised to see him. He says, "Yeah, I've been here the whole time." I'm not drafting him until he officially signs with somebody. At this point in the season, at this point in the year, I'm not reacting to those rumors. I'll wait until he's with the team because there are plenty of other guys that will do just fine.
Yeah, there's going to be other guys in drafts playing a young man's position, by the way, in running back that will have been drafted by a team, right, will have already had a role, that will have much less tread or much more tread on their tires, a lot more youth on their side than Marshawn Lynch. So certainly there is upside there, but there might be more upside with a younger guy. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, if those rumors persist, maybe he makes DeAndre Washington and Jalen Richard values at this point. If those guys are slipping down draft boards, those are guys that I'll take, because even if Lynch signs with them, there are going to be touches spread around. It's not like he's going to come back and touch the ball 370 times.
That's a great point as well. Sometimes we have delusions of grandeur when we score on Marshawn Lynch in the 18th round, and if he comes back, and that could pay off, but may not pay off to the level that you would expect. If you would have asked me, Matt, if I would be on a fantasy football podcast in 2017 talking about Tim Hightower, I would have told you were nuts. But here we are, 2017. Tim Hightower visited the Washington Redskins on Wednesday, according to ESPN.com. Shockingly, I thought he was in his 50s. He actually doesn't turn 31 until May. Did not play in 2012, 2013, 2014 after he tore his ACL with Washington. Had some complications with that injury afterwards. Rob Kelly came on strong after Matt Jones really did not bring anything to the table in that offense the last couple of years. Rob Kelly actually showed quite a bit, and Tim Hightower was great down the stretch in the 2016 season for anybody that had him going when he was a member of the New Orleans Saints. But bringing this discussion back to Washington, really, is Hightower like a real thing for them here? And is Rob Kelly going to be their guy going into the 2017 season? Or are we just not talking enough about the possibility of Washington maybe taking a running back in the first or second round and riding that guy as the starter in, starting in week one?
First of all, I'm old enough that the name Hightower always makes me think of Police Academy first.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, as for the running back, the ageless wonder running back, if he actually signs in Washington, I think he's in the competition for touches there, because I don't think it's that good a backfield. If they don't draft a running back within the first 3 rounds, or at least round 4, because, sometimes we can see valuable guys in that range, or round 5 like Jordan Howard last year. If they don't draft a guy who can compete for touches this year, I'll probably be chuckling as we're watching the draft, and probably making jokes somewhere in print. Because they need somebody. Rob Kelly was impressive versus what we expected heading into last season. That's because none of us expected anything. He was fine, but I think, I don't know, it feels like some of his success has been overplayed. He's not being overdrafted at this point, because I think it seems like the draft public feels the same way I do. He's going outside of the range from what I've seen so far. So if they don't add a significant challenge to him, I think Rob Kelly is the top guy. Whoever is the starting running back for Washington next year, they finished 12th and 10th in scoring the past 2 years, so it's a good situation.
Yeah, Fat Rob Kelly. Who knew that he would be the guy that we would be talking about here?
That guy, he's not fat. You got to be fatter than that if you're going to carry that nickname.
No, I'm not even calling
a fat guy.
No, listen. I have defended Eddie Lacy to the hilt on this show. This is not my call. I think he likes going by Fat Rob, or somebody like gave him that nickname, or maybe he said, "Oh yeah, I'm Fat Rob." But somehow, like, this is a thing, and I never really thought of him as Fat Rob Kelly until people were calling him Fat Rob, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess he's Fat Rob." But yeah, there are definitely more rotund running backs than him in the NFL.
Yeah, he wears it like a badge. So I know it's him. But it offends me that he wears it like he does as a former fat guy myself.
It's like Larry David on Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he's offended by guys shaving their head when he's like, actually, he doesn't have a choice in the matter and he has to be bald. Anyway, let's get on to another situation that you said was a little fuzzy for you right now, and it's fuzzy for everyone. But in a Wednesday conference call, Kamar Aiken, the new Indianapolis Colts, said that new GM Chris Ballard told him that he will have a chance to win the number 3 receiver job, catching passes from Andrew Luck. This is from Zach Kiefer on Twitter. Chris Ballard has no ties to Philip Dorsett. He did not take him in the first round 2 years ago. Does not care, or probably doesn't care, if he is the number 3, the number 4, the number 5, or whatever wideout on the team. But Chris Ballard did sign Kamar Aiken this week. And Aiken said he was told that there was going to be an open competition in the receiving room. So, and remember, this is a guy that crushed it for Baltimore in 2015 and then sort of was phased out in 2016 with Steve Smith and Mike Wallace really coming on, even Brashad Perriman to a certain extent. But Aiken did not have that same role in 2016 Baltimore like he did for the Ravens in 2015. You look at Aiken v. Dorsett. Who do you like here, Matt Schauf? Do you like Aiken? Do you like Dorsett? Or for fantasy purposes, does it not matter? Are you just staying away from this situation unless you own Moncrief, or if you own Hilton and you're just looking for some sort of handcuff insurance later on in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is they're both going very late, so I don't think that you need to be hands off because you're taking a lottery ticket in either case. I'll take Aiken first because I think he's a little bit more different than what they already have. T.Y. Hilton, Dante Moncrief have plenty of speed between them, so they don't need a guy that can burn it. We'll see what they feel like they need, but they're also a little thinner at tight end now than they have been the past few years. So maybe there are a few more targets available for a slot type of guy like Kamar Aiken. At the same time, if I'm a high volume draft experts format player this time of year, I'm probably spreading it a little bit between both of them because it's a good situation. Philip Dorsett's the big play guy. He should the big play potential guy because of the speed. He should have more yards per catch. Maybe that turns into a couple extra touchdowns luck-wise. But I would lean Aiken, not excited about either of them.
Speaking of those Baltimore Ravens, Dennis Pitta took a $2.5 million pay cut over the next 2 seasons. He's going to make $2.5 million this year in base salary. A $500,000 roster bonus is also coming his way. He was scheduled to earn $5.5 million. It frees up $2.5 million over the next 2 seasons for Baltimore. Remember, Dennis Pitta last year, I don't want to say he came out of nowhere because we kind of knew who he was, but I don't think anybody saw an 80-plus catch season from him last year. You look at the FFPC, a tight end premium format that really rewards tight ends who catch a ton of passes. How does he finish among the tight ends in the FFPC in 2017, Matt?
Well, we'll see if we hear good stuff about Max Williams this offseason. There hasn't been a whole lot going on with him to this point, but he looked good in college. It's still a great situation for a tight end to be in because they started out with a weak wide receiver core, and then they lost Steve Smith, and then they let Kamar Aiken walk. So there should be plenty of targets available. The last time before last year that Dennis Pitta was healthy was 2012. He finished 3rd on the team and tied for 9th in the league among tight ends and targets that year with 94. So if we head into the season with Dennis Pitta still looking like the number 1 tight end for Baltimore and still going well into tight end 2 range, there's no reason not to take a shot on him. At worst, you take the 19th tight end off the board and he doesn't pan out. And at best, you get somebody that's top 10 at the position in targets.
Matt Schauf from DraftSharks.com, the writer and podcaster there, the award-winning podcaster from DraftSharks.com, joining the show this week. Matt, Ron O'Leary, Menelik Watson, singled out by head coach Vance Joseph at Denver Broncos. New head coach Vance Joseph at a press conference this week said that they signed those guys to change the culture of the offensive line. The quote from Vance Joseph: "Running the ball on our terms, heavy box or light box. Let's run the football. That is the attitude that you want." So this speaks good things for C.J. Anderson if he can stay healthy this year. Maybe he is a guy that could potentially outperform his draft slot. Is Anderson the guy to own in Denver this year for fantasy purposes? Is Devontae Booker the Sharky guy to add later on in the draft? Are they done adding pieces to this offensive backfield, Matt? Because maybe the starting running back isn't on this team yet. Maybe the guy that is going to be finishing first among Denver running backs is sitting in the NFL draft right now. C.J. Anderson having an ADP of the 410 right now in FFPC drafts. What do you think of this Broncos ground game as we look forward to the start of the season?
I think C.J. Anderson's the starting running back there. I think if they draft somebody, we'll see what they do because you can't really predict. But I think if they draft somebody in, say, round 4, folks might start saying, whoa, they don't like C.J. Anderson. I think that'll be more of a knock on Devontae Booker, who I liked heading into last season, but he sucked. I mean, C.J. Anderson had the great start to the year, and then after a little while it was like, oh, maybe Booker's better than Anderson. And then he got his opportunity, and he was terrible. And I think the way that he played and the fact that they felt like it was a good idea to bring in Justin Forsett kind of speaks toward – how C.J. Anderson was probably a little bit better than he looked early in the season because it was not a good situation for a running back. I wish Anderson was going a little bit later in drafts, though.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, that's another guy last year that I said that was simply just going too late in FFPC drafts last year, and in the Kentucky drafts that we were in, I was getting him in a bunch of spots, and then after, week 1, he just crushed it. I'm like, oh, man, this is going to be a great year. I got Anderson in all these spots. And it didn't really work out that way. And I had Booker in a lot of spots, too. And I had Ajayi, just as, sort of let's see what happens with Arian Foster. And then when both Anderson and Foster went down, I thought I had some pretty dominant teams with Booker and Ajayi, and it didn't work out that way, unfortunately, as it has been known to happen with my fantasy teams. We got to get to a break, but I want to get to one last piece of information here with the Tampa Bay ground game. Dirk Ketter, the head coach down there, said it's very hard to feature 2 running backs in an offense. The OC there, Todd Monken, said he's looking forward to having Doug Martin back because he says that he's the guy that adds explosion to that backfield that they didn't have last year with all the injuries. Monken made a point of saying they had 6 different guys carry the ball last year. Doug Martin, remember, if he is brought back, which sounds like he's going to be, he will not be playing for the first 3 games because of a suspension. They'll be using Jacquizz Rodgers, Charles Sims, and maybe somebody else in an RBBC while Martin is out with the suspension. Is Martin being underdrafted right now, Matt? I mean, is he a guy that could be a sneaky top 20 guy? I'm just looking at his ADP right now of where he's going, and I know with the suspension it's got to be affecting it. He has an ADP right now of the 11-6, which is crazy to me that he's going that late. I know he is going earlier in some drafts. He has gone as early as the 5th round. But your thoughts on where Doug Martin should be drafted here in March?
Yeah, I mean, I think he belongs in the later single-digit round territory at least. I think he's being underdrafted at this point. I certainly think as long as there's no relapse or whatever, I don't know. It's tough to know his exact drug situation, but I can't say that I'm all that worried. As long as it seems that things are continuing to move in the right direction, he's only 28, which is kind of old at running back, but it's still prime time. I'm willing to bet on him at this point at the price it costs to bet on him.
Yeah, and it's always good when you're hearing positive things coming from the coaching staff and from the front office, the organization there, which is, it sounds like they're very excited to get Doug Martin back. So you should feel warm and fuzzy if you can get him at a discount right now as well. Final break of the show coming up. We have much more with Matt Schauf. He's going to answer your emails when we come back. DraftSharks.com writer and podcaster, co-hosting with me tonight, sitting in for Dave Gerzak. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Emails, tweets, and more here on the HSFF Hour. Eric Balkman, along with DraftSharks.com's Matt Schauf, the writer and podcaster extraordinaire. Coming up, what is this? How many times have you co-hosted with me now, Matt? Is this number 3?
I think so. Although it feels like much more.
Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, we had a lot of conversations when we were co-owning that Scott Fishbowl team last year, which I thought I was really happy how. I mean, we ended up losing in the division championship, I think. And if we would have went on, I think we would have ended up playing for it all. I don't think we would have won it. But you had a lot of great picks last year. The Golden Tate pick was really good. The Michael Thomas one was obviously massive. You had a lot of great drafting decisions. So I can say, this is not just me talking about how great my guest is. Matt knows his stuff, and you need to subscribe to DraftSharks.com. Follow him on Twitter at SchaufDS as well. Let's get to some emails here, Matt, if I can get them from Rob. Thank you very much. Okay, first one tonight from Brian in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You guys talked about this on the show briefly last week, but can the New England passing offense support Gronk, Edelman, and Cooks? Thank you for the email, Brian. It's going to be a tall order for all three of those guys to return value at where they're being drafted right now. Who's the odd man out for you, Matt?
I mean, I don't think there has to be one. So we were talking about the backfield earlier. They've leaned a bit more run lately, but I think that's just how they've been built. If you look at 2015, they leaned pass more than they did in any of the other surrounding seasons. So I think picking up Brandon Cooks might just be a signal that they're going to lean in the other direction this year. I think that's a team you can count on to do whatever's smart for them to do. And at this point, it doesn't seem like any of those guys are really going in outlandish spots. Brandon Cooks might be going a little bit early for me value-wise, but I'm not ready to call any of them a bad pick where they're going.
Yeah, I'm just looking right now here. Gronk, ADP of the 202. Brandon Cooks, again, this was, a lot of these drafts took place while he was still in New Orleans Saint, the 301, and Julian Edelman down at the 407. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they do end up, obviously I think Cook slips a little bit. So maybe they I mean, the thing is, if they all return value, Brady's going to be a good pick this year with all three of those guys having good seasons for sure. Let me ask you something as a follow-up to that, Matt. We talked about the chicken or the egg theory with Brady throwing deep on this show, and I was saying, Brady just doesn't throw deep anymore. I said Brady hasn't thrown deep since he had Randy Moss, and Dave was of the opinion, look, maybe he doesn't throw deep anymore because he hasn't had a threat like Randy Moss. Well, now he has that threat in Brandon Cooks. So I think maybe the answer here is Bill Belichick saying, yes, he can throw deep. He will throw deep. That's why we gave up a first-round pick to get Cooks.
Right. They traded a first-round pick for Cooks. They traded with the Colts to get Dwayne Allen. And all they have in the backfield so far is Rex Burkhead and a bunch of guys who catch passes. Rex Burkhead is another guy who catches passes. They might lead the league in pass attempts this year. I think that's a realistic possibility. I wouldn't bet on it, but it's within the realm of potential happenings.
Yeah, once again, New England going to be a fascinating fantasy situation for the umpteenth year in a row to watch. Dear Starsky and Hutch, is this the year that we see Freeman and Coleman split the load 50-50? Much love. That's Jace in Pomona, California. Okay, real quick about this. I believe Atlanta has not extended Devontae Freeman. I think this is his last year on that contract. So it would really, and this is how I'm looking at it from a GM and a coaching standpoint, it would behoove them to get everything they possibly can out of Freeman, let him go to the free agency market, see what he can get, and then really, have Tevin Coleman be your guy next year. I don't really see how it behooves them to have a 50-50 split this year. Your thoughts on the running backs in Atlanta?
I agree, and on top of that, Devontae Freeman's delivered for them when he's gotten the ball the past couple years, so it's fine to stick with him as the slight lead. I think we're looking at more like 65-35, 60-40 We'll see when I get into my numbers, but I would not bet on them being totally 50-50 this season as long as both guys are healthy, assuming both guys are healthy.
Next email here from Roy in El Paso, Texas. He writes, I own Le'Veon Bell in 2 of my dynasty leagues, but unsure on who to cuff him with in the rookie draft, Niall Davis or Fitzgerald Toussaint. That is Roy in El Paso, Texas. I don't know if this is, I guess I wouldn't go crazy in my rookie draft cuffing Le'Veon Bell. I mean, if you're in like a 12-team league with like Blake Harrington, 12 teams, it's a 4-round rookie draft. I guess in the 3rd round is probably where I would look at taking a cuff. I mean, in the first 2 rounds, I'm looking for talent. But neither one of these guys excites me. I mean, you could probably get them. Who else is going to be taking these guys? And Pittsburgh, Matt, might end up taking a running back on day 2 or day 3.
Yeah, if the backfield heading into the NFL draft is Bell, Toussaint, and Niall Davis, I would assume that they're going to draft somebody. I don't think the handcuff for Le'Veon Bell is on the roster right now. I would not spend a rookie draft pick on either of them unless you go to 5 or 6 rounds and Niall Davis is still sitting there. I wouldn't draft Toussaint anywhere.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Steelers, ever drafted him themselves. Let's go to the next email here. This is also from Matt with 1 T in Little Rock, Arkansas. He writes, what the hell is Green Bay doing at running back? Montgomery, Michael, and Jackson. WTF, man, WTF. Love the show, though. That's Matt in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is, near and dear to my heart. The Packers running back situation did not play out how I thought it would have played out as far as this offseason goes. I did not. I mean, if you would have asked me, by the way, at the end of March, Green Bay is going to have Ty Montgomery, Kristen Michael, and Don Jackson as their 3 running backs. Oh, and by the way, people are going to be picking them to win the Super Bowl, which, I mean, it's crazy to me. I'm not really sure what they're doing. I know that, I read today that the Packers turned down the opportunity just to visit with Adrian Peterson, and I don't know if that was, like a posturing, because just the fact that if Adrian Peterson really is asking for $8 million to play football this year, that seems a little crazy to me. And maybe Green Bay was just, took the standpoint of, if that's going to be your asking point, we're not even going to visit with you. We're not going to, talk about you joining this football team until that price goes down. I don't know. But Matt, I mean, Green Bay's running back situation, clearly they're going to be adding somebody to me on day 1 or day 2 of the NFL draft.
Yeah, as somebody who's watching football news all year round, I think people pay a little bit too much attention to football news this time of year. People are freaking out if their team did not address whatever need they think their team needs to address by now. If the Packers, let's say 2 months from now, the Packers have drafted Joe Mixon, whatever you think of his off-field stuff. If they draft him in round 3, then from a football standpoint, you got to be feeling pretty good about what they have going on in the backfield. So we'll see at this. I don't think that their backfield is complete right now. At the same time, I think they're one of the few teams that could be just fine if that is what their backfield looks like heading into the season, at least from a fantasy standpoint, because it'll mean more pass attempts for Aaron Rodgers once again.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thunk that Green Bay would decide to draft and develop for their running back situation, when Ted Thompson really does this every single year with every position, except for the rare, Peppers, Woodson, Cook, Bennett signing or what have you. It does happen, but most of the time, this is a draft and develop team. They're going to draft and develop a running back. And frankly, they're going to be developing Kristen Michael in this system, and they're going to be developing Ty Montgomery as a running back this year. Don't underrate the fact that Montgomery is going to have this full off-season preparation of going to running back meetings, watching running back film, being a running back in the system. This is a position that he picked up, out of necessity halfway through the year and did all right at it. So I think big things could be in store for him. I do believe that he is going to be a major part of a committee in Green Bay this year. Mac in Springfield, Massachusetts. Give me your read on Spencer Ware. Is he going to be a top 15 guy this year, or is KC going to bring in someone else yet? Thank you for the email, Mac. Sounds like Jamal Charles is done in Kansas City. I don't see him coming back. I do think they add somebody in the draft as well. but is that someone going to be the starter over Spencer Ware? I know that Andy Reid had a lot of great things to say about Spencer Ware, stating that maybe, if you read between the lines, maybe Ware is ready to be a full-time running back this season, and that he won't wear down the second half like he did. But I'll let Matt I'll let you talk about Spencer Ware. I think that top 15 is not out of the realm of possibility in 2017.
Yeah, I wouldn't draft him top 15, but I think his ceiling reaches into the top 15. It's a good situation. I would bet right now on him leading the backfield in touches, even if they add somebody. I would not bet on them adding somebody in the first round or two with the intention of starting that guy over Spencer Ware.
Final email we have tonight. This is from Jeff in Chicago, Illinois. Happy NFL draft season, guys. Love that you are back on the strip this year for the main event. Well, so are we. Thank you. I am getting 2 teams with a buddy, but we're torn on what to do with Lacy, Rawls, and ProSize. How would you guys be drafting them in the main event? That is Jeff in Chicago, Illinois. Much like a lot of the discussion that we've already had on the show, we're going to get the benefit of seeing these guys work in training camp, seeing them work in practices, seeing them work in preseason. We're going to see how Seattle views these guys. And I'm always of the standpoint of, you can do all the personal talent evaluation you want. You can, talk about how player X is much better than player Y till you turn blue in the face. It doesn't matter, because the only opinions that truly matter is the front office and the head coaches, because they're the ones giving these guys snaps. They're the ones who are in charge of putting them on the football field to succeed. And if they don't agree with you, then they're going to put their guy out there. So that's how you have to look at that. And Matt, we're going to get the benefit of seeing how Seattle works in Lacy and Rawls and ProSize this preseason. But if you're drafting right now, is this a situation to stay away from, or is this a situation where you can really capitalize on some value with one of these 3?
I would like to see one of them between. I don't want any part of Thomas Rawls, so I would like to see one between Eddie Lacy and CJ ProSize going later than they are. They're outside RB2 territory from what I've seen so far, but they're very close together, within a round of each other, I believe, in ADP. I like ProSize. I love ProSize as a player. I like Eddie Lacy. I am going to need to see what his injury status is when we get closer to the season, how his conditioning is, as everybody's going to be wondering. So I guess right now I would have to lean ProSize straight up, just because I think he's more explosive and is not at least coming off a significant surgery with the conditioning issue. If, once we get closer to the season, though, if Lacy's in condition, if his ankle's holding up, if he starts training camp on time, I think he's the better bet, because it's a great situation for rushing touchdowns, and he's the best bet for those there.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of physical condition CJ ProSize is in right now, but I would bet my next 10 paychecks that he is not pushing 270 pounds like somebody else in this backfield might be. I looked at their ADP, Matt, 7-7 for Eddie Lacy, 7-6 for Thomas Rawls, and actually 7-12 for CJ ProSize. So they're all going in the back end of the 7th round right now. ProSize and Lacy would be the 2 pass catchers out of the 2, which is, something we're always after in fantasy football, PPR leagues. So there is value to be mined there right now. And I think that, if you're drafting multiple FFPC DEs right now, it would probably not be the worst idea in the world to grab a couple of shares of those guys in the late 7th. I'm with you on Rawls. I've never been a Rawls guy, but the other 2. And Matt, and I'll leave you with this too. $3 million guaranteed for Eddie Lacy. I mean, some of that's, the $5.5 million. Some of that's performance as well. That's, to me right now in today's NFL, that's starter's money. I mean, Adrian Peterson was still out there. Jamal Charles was still out there, and they agreed to give $3 million guaranteed to Eddie Lacy. I think they picture big things for him in that offense. The offensive line's not great, but they certainly think good things of Lacy.
Right, and I did like Rawls before, but when you sign Eddie Lacy, that's saying we don't believe in Thomas Rawls to me. You look at all the other guys that they had in, it's pretty clear to me that they were trying to upgrade on Thomas Rawls. CJ ProSize is a much different athlete than a lot of the guys that they brought in to give a look. So I think there's a spot for him no matter how good or bad Eddie Lacy is, and then Eddie Lacy's health is going to determine how big that role is for CJ ProSize this fall.
Well, there's always a spot for him. There's always a spot for you on this show, my friend. I appreciate you coming on, Matt Schauf, DraftSharks.com, DraftSharks award-winning podcaster, DraftSharks writer. A lot of great stuff. Obviously, we always pimp up DraftSharks during the season, not because we have to, because we want to, because it is a great site. It will help you win leagues. I haven't even mentioned how many times you guys have won the Accuracy Award with the FSTA as well, so that's certainly a feather in your cap as well. Follow DraftSharks on Twitter at DraftSharks. Follow Matt on Twitter at SchaufDS. We will talk to you again real soon, man. It's it won't be long before we're sitting talking Scott Fishbowl strategy again for this coming summer for those drafts as well. So it'll be here before we know it. Thank you so much for coming on short notice tonight, man. I really appreciate it.
Always happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Matt Schauf, ladies and gentlemen. Follow him at SchaufDS on Twitter. And that is going to do it for our show tonight. I want to thank, of course, Matt Schauf for coming on the show. I noticed Two-Packer is giving me Wisconsin Badgers updates in the chat and talking about how they were up 10 and it wasn't even close. And now all of a sudden they're down at the half by 2. Once again, thank you, Two-Packer.
Welcome to Metro PCS.
Hi, I heard you're giving free phones to everybody?
Yes, right now everybody gets a free phone. You and your friends, cousins, neighbors, roommates.
What if I'm already with Metro PCS?
Yeah, it's for existing customers, new customers, people named Willie, dog lovers.
That's awesome.
Everyone gets a free phone at Metro PCS. Come choose your select free phone from brands like Samsung and LG. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out. Sales tax not included. Phones free after instant and mail-in rebates. Upgrade fee may apply. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Welcome to Metro PCS.
Hi, I heard you're giving free phones to everybody?
Yes, right now everybody gets a free phone. You and your friends, cousins, neighbors, roommates.
What if I'm already with Metro PCS?
Yeah, it's for existing customers, new customers, people named Willie, dog lovers.
That's awesome.
Everyone gets a free phone at Metro PCS. Come choose your select free phone from brands like Samsung and LG. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out. Sales tax not included. Phones free after instant and mail-in rebates. Upgrade fee may apply. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.